Hello and welcome to Driving Systems of High Performance, a podcast all about how teams successfully use data and insights to expedite the move from strategy to action. I'm Nick Polce, and today I'm joined by special guest Otmar Szafnauer, founder of Soft Pauer and previously team principal at Alpine, Aston Martin and Force India F1 teams. We're sitting down live from the Accenture office in Melbourne in advance of the Australian Grand Prix. Excellent. Well, thank you for joining. This is excellent, and what a rare opportunity to have Otmar here with us today. I'll do an official kind of introduction in a minute, but really over the course of the hour, we're going to explore the topic of F1. Obviously, it's F1 week here in Melbourne, start of the new season, so everyone's very excited about the season ahead. But we're going to unpack kind of the inner workings of F1, how they leverage data and AI, create high-performing teams, and how we can, take away insights and translate that into the business world. So that's what we're here today. I'll run a session. I'll ask a couple of questions of Otmar. He'll talk forever, and then we'll open it up at the end for a couple of questions from the audience. So encourage you to, think about your questions beforehand, and I'll roam the room, or someone will roam the room with a mic, and make sure we make this, huge benefit for you. And maybe start with a round of applause for Otmar who's given up his time.
It's very kind of you, and thank you, and thanks everyone for coming. Thanks for taking the time. And I hope that the stories and the anecdotes that I tell you is a little bit more fun than sitting at your desks. This is probably like why you came. But speaking of sitting, there's still some empty chairs up here if you get front.
Absolutely. Yeah. So those at the back, feel free to.
Come on.
All right, no worries at all. We're going to touch on a number of different topics over the course of the hour, and we're probably going to start in the space of data and AI. And I'm trying to think about how to introduce Otmar a little bit differently. So I typed it into ChatGPT. So I'm going to read out what it says, and then Otmar's going to give the critique. So today we've got a man who spent decades navigating the high-speed world of Formula One, where the only thing faster than the cars is the backroom politics. Otmar has led teams through financial chaos, surprise rebrands, and enough driver drama to make reality TV look tame. He's been the mastermind behind underdog success stories, a survivor of the sport's most brutal boardroom battles, and let's be honest, probably the only guy who could explain the F1 budget cap without breaking into a cold sweat. From his days at Force India, where they somehow made magic on a shoestring budget, to Racing Point's Pink Revolution and Alpine's game of musical chairs, Otmar has seen it all. He's an engineer, a strategist, and possibly the only team principal who hasn't thrown a headset in rage on live TV yet. We're diving into the inside track of F1's high-stakes world of leadership, decision-making, and whether Otmar keeps a list of all the crazy excuses drivers give after crashing. So let's do this. How was that?
Actually, that was pretty good. The thing that I liked most about that, did they say mastermind?
They did. Nice. You like that bit?
I like that AI stuff. Anyway, that's pretty close. 27th year, I think, now in Formula One. I think, I'm not a current team principal, but when I was at Alpine a year ago, I think I was the longest standing team principal, even, longer than who else has been there a long time. Christian Horner. He's probably the longest now. I remember negotiating with him when I was at Honda for powertrains, and he was negotiating with us, with Renault, and with Cosworth all at the same time. And I think Christian, in a way that only Christian can do, he promised, I think, all three of us that we would sell him engines, which we didn't know. But for us, it wasn't that big of a deal at Honda. We're trying to help the sport, really, not trying to sell engines for any kind of profit or revenue. That's not what Honda do, sell Formula One engines. But I think for Cosworth, it was a bit of a blow that they went with Renault. Anyway, they did go with Renault. They won 4 world championships with Renault and then had a bit of a falling out. So I don't know how I got on the subject, but that's not Olivia to talk about. I think we can talk about some other stuff. So the format of the day, I think we discussed, you can ask questions. I encourage you to ask questions. I think I'm more of an introvert and I don't like to talk, but Matt, my friend in the back of the room, says otherwise. I think he's wrong and I'm right. But ask anything you want, and I'll do my best to give you the answers, and also to give you some anecdotes of what I've learned in my 27 years of Formula One.
Awesome. Thanks, Otmar. We're talking about data and AI ahead. It's obviously something that's very pertinent and hot in the market. And we also talked about in your intro, excuses for drivers' crashes. Have you got a story that combines those two elements?
I've got a story, and we did this yesterday with some of your guests, and this is a story I told, and the reason for it is we discussed a couple things, and you can wrap it up into this story. One, to make a good decision, you need good information. And if you don't have good information, you can be the best decision maker in the world. You're going to get it wrong. And these are really, really simple concepts, but it's amazing how simple that is and how many people will make decisions with poor information. And then you get it wrong. So I'm sure you've heard this before, but just when you're in a situation in your job and you're making decisions, and you're going to make decisions every day, the better the information that you have before you make that decision, the better chance you have of making a good decision. So that's one thing we discussed yesterday, and this story will encompass that. And the other thing is about emotional decision-making instead of rational. And I've witnessed in my life, I'm 60 years old now, many times where people that are really respected for their intelligence, their intellect, their knowledge, their education, when they were in an emotional situation, they couldn't make a good decision. And I was really, really surprised, because some of these people I looked up to and thought, the smartest guy I ever met. And then he's going through a divorce because it's very emotional, couldn't make a decision. He was coming to me and asking me questions, and I'm thinking, this is so simple. But for me, it was simple because I wasn't emotionally involved at all. So the decision was simple for me, and I was able to help him. But what that taught me was the smartest guy I know, when he's involved emotionally, can't make a good decision. So that's the other thing to recognize. And the more data-driven you are in your decision-making, the less emotion it is, right? So with that, Turkey, Crofty New the Year, 2020. We're racing in Turkey. We hadn't raced there for a while. And the reason we're racing in Turkey was, at that time, if you remember, in 2020, I was actually here in Melbourne with a really good car. And Friday night, Thursday night, we're up till 4 a.m, all the team principals, some of the owners, Formula One, and the FIA deciding whether we were going to race because COVID had just hit. And in Melbourne, there are only a few cases at that time, maybe like 18, because people were counting. In England, there's a horse race that happens at the same time that this race happens, called Cheltenham. I've never been because I'm always here. Big horse race, first horse race of the season. They run the horse race, 60,000 people. A McLaren employee ended up testing positive, and we had to decide whether we're racing or not. And we had a pretty good car that year. And I voted for racing, and maybe that was a bit selfish on my part at that time, but I thought, one person with COVID, I didn't know where COVID was going, we should be racing. As it turned out, we all decided to race. I went to bed at 4 a.m, and by the time I got up 3 hours later, the decision was overturned, and I was on a flight back home. And after I got home, it was only days later the entire country shut down. And then I remember early July, we're the only live sport to start again. And we started in Austria with a doubleheader. We raced in Austria twice. Anyway, in that year, 2020, Turkey, because a lot of countries said, no, we don't want live sport. We don't want you to come. We raced in Portugal. We raced in places we haven't raced for a long time. And Turkey was one of them. So we go to Istanbul. We hadn't raced there for a while, and they decided it was a really, really good idea to resurface the track, new tarmac. But they did it only 2 weeks before we got there. And I'm no expert, but what happened was the new tarmac was still releasing chemicals. It was still setting, and it rained. So the combination of chemicals being released with the rain made the surface like ice. It was so slippery. And we had a really, really good tire engineer, Jun Matsuzaki, who was head of tire engineering for Bridgestone. I hired him at Force India. And he counterintuitively suggested that we go 5 psi higher on the front tires than we normally would. And for those of you who enjoy motor racing, you'd never want to go up on tire pressure, because what that does is the contact patch, which is the only thing you have to give you some lateral force, gets smaller. And you want that contact patch to be as big as possible. So it's counterintuitive, but he was right. To this day, I still don't know why he was right, but I'll have to ask him. I think it's kind of like a little bit when, does it snow here? Not really.
Not really.
In snow, you're better off with really, really narrow tires, and where all the load goes onto a smaller patch, you're better off than a big wide tire. But so Jun said, high front pressures, 5 psi up. Guess what? We're on pole position. I don't know if any of you watched that race, but Lance Stroll on pole. It's like a miracle.
Unheard of.
Unheard of. Not only that, we start the race, and he takes off and leaves the field behind. We have a 14-second lead with, I don't know, that was probably within 20 laps. And I'm thinking, we're going to win this race. Unbeknownst to us on the pit wall, Lance went off track. And when he came back on, he went over a curb. And when he went over the curb, underneath the front wing, there are these aerodynamic aids that help push the air out from underneath the floor called strakes. And there's a few front strakes on both sides of the front wing. Anyway, when he came back on over the curb, he broke one of the strakes. And that strake didn't just fall off. Had it fallen off, we would have won the race. But it got lodged in between the other strakes. So usually the strakes are, say, in the vertical. This was in the horizontal across all the other strakes, which meant the front wing wasn't working anymore. We start getting graining on the front tires. And graining on the front tires is just like little baubles all over the front tire. Your contact patch goes away. You start getting understeer. The more understeer you have, the more graining you get. You destroy the front tires. He started going backwards. And as he was going backwards and people were catching him, we thought, we could see the graining. We take pictures every lap of the tires so we can see what we're doing. And we thought, okay, well, we got to bring him in. The tires are graining. And sometimes the tires will go through a graining phase and come out the other end and they're okay. But this just kept getting worse. So we bring him in, change the front tires. He goes out again. Within 8 laps, graining again. And we're looking at the front wing data because the front wing is instrumented. Again, good information to make a good decision. So now we're looking at front wing data to see if the front wing is actually not performing. It's instrumented so that you can actually deduce downforce through these little vanes that record how much suction there is under the front wing. And we see that the front wing's not working, and the little vanes that we have instrumented aren't producing any type of downforce. But we thought, because it's raining so much, they're full of water. We thought all the vanes are full of water, so that it can't be that the front wing just stopped working. So we ignored the data. We bring them in again, another pit stop, another tire change, and I can't remember where he finished, but outside the points or got a couple of points, should have won the race. Afterwards, we recognized and saw what happened to the front strake and then talked to him. Had, number one, we believed the data that the front wing wasn't working, We would have changed that front wing. It would have cost us about 7-8 seconds. We would have won the race because that's all it was. So number one, we should have believed the data or looked into it further. Number two, had Lance told us that he went off track, we then would have started looking for other things, including when he came in for the pit stop, we may have looked underneath the front wing and saw the strake. We could either pulled it off or changed the nose. We would have won the race. But he didn't tell us, and we didn't believe the data that we had. We lost the race. Now, if Lance's dad didn't own the team,
might have been a different situation.
He may have told us that he went off track. But with his dad there, not wanting to let his dad down, the guy who bought the team for him, he's making an emotional decision. Why didn't he tell us? It could very well have been that emotion. Had he been at Williams where his dad wasn't there or didn't own the team, he may have said, hey, I went off track. Maybe that's why my front tires are graining. So those two things wrapped up in a story, a true story. I told it yesterday. Crofty, who was with me, David Croft, he was there, remembered it well, but had no idea why we didn't win that race because we went from a 14-second lead to I can't even remember where Lance finished. Anyway, in one story, 2 lessons. 1, emotional decisions, not the best. And 2, trust the data.
And with that scenario, did you look at multiple data points to try and identify the root cause?
So one,
or would you have done anything differently?
No, you do. You look at more than that. So for the tire engineer, for example, he's looking at energy input into the tires. He's looking at, well, why is this graining happening? The aerodynamicists are looking at front wing data. Some of the vehicle dynamicists would be looking at load cells that we have in all the 4 corners, it loads to see not just is the instrumentation on the wing working, but am I actually getting loads through the suspension? You know, we have push rod load cells that tell you how much downforce you get. So we're looking at all that kind of stuff, and we still made a bad decision.
There you go.
Anyway, and then I've got another story for you later.
We'll get to that.
Any questions?
We've got a question here. We'll get a roving mic to you. Just one sec.
Sorry, just a quick question. How do you tie all those inputs into making a decision? So obviously a number of inputs during that process. So coming from different people.
So we have a bit of a hierarchy at a race weekend, and underneath the chief engineer, you have people that are looking at the data they're most familiar with or they have expertise in. So an aerodynamicist is looking at aero data, vehicle dynamicist is looking at loads, a tire engineer is looking at tire data, and then they will feed into the chief engineer first, who's got a broad understanding of everything. And then from chief engineer, we go to race engineer, and they communicate that to the driver. And the communication with the driver will be race engineer only, so we don't confuse them. And we also have protocols as to how you talk to the driver, how you talk to each other. You know, identify yourself first so you know who's talking, and the protocols we actually learned from the military. And they work, actually from the Air Force. Right. So it's how people communicate when they're flying jets, and so they don't make mistakes. So we have that protocol. And, you know, we all missed it. But the data was there to point us in the right direction. We didn't believe it because it was raining and there were other circumstances. We didn't know he went off track, for example. You know, why are we getting all this graining? No one else is having graining. Anyway, we found out later.
So data and AI has obviously come along in leaps and bounds over the past couple of years. What has it been like for you in the field of F1 over the past 3 years, and what's on the horizon in terms of innovation in that space?
We collect an enormous amount of data in all different aspects of racing, one of which is only because it has such a massive influence on competitiveness is aerodynamics. And aero data, it's just so much of it. And AI helps with discerning trends and what is important for a decision making in aero, because you get so much data. The noise you have to get rid of, and you have to start looking at trends. So a Formula One team will have around 25 people in a group called APG, which is the Aero Performance Group. And all they're doing is looking at real live data from the track that's generally collected on a Friday. So on a Friday, you'll see the cars are very instrumented. Sometimes you see like a lot of pitot tubes behind a wheel, for example, and that's to be able to see what kind of vortices the car's creating to try to deduce drag, downforce, all those things.
And they're race ready on a Friday?
So on a Friday, you run those things as a test, and you collect the data so that you can make decisions generally to give you an idea of what your models were like if they correlate to reality. So before you go racing or testing, everything's modeled. So we start with usually CFD models, computational fluid dynamics, and those are all AI driven now. We have software programs that sometimes are written in-house.
Yeah.
And the reason we can buy and then enhance. And the reason we do that is so we have a strategic advantage, so others can't buy what you have, and hopefully you've enhanced to a level that's higher so you can actually do a better job. But so first you start with CFD, you run some optimization software as well. When you think the components that you're going to put on the car work a little bit better, give you a little bit better lap time, and you have a good belief that CFD correlates to reality. That's the other big thing for us, is actually correlating your models to what's real. That correlation is important. If you have good correlation, then you actually make the part in 60% of a real part and stick it in the wind tunnel. So that wind tunnel, although it's a physical model that looks like a car that's in a wind tunnel with air being forced over it, and then you measure downforce drag and some other parameters at different yaw rates, that too is a model. That's not reality. And then you have to correlate that model, which is a physical model, but again, it's a model, to reality. And reality is your race car. And that's why we instrument and then look back to make sure that our models are actually correlating to reality. Because the amount of times the aerodynamicist and the team, this package is going to get us 0.3 of a second a lap, and you go slower. How can that be? That's because you don't have good correlation between your models, and your models are telling you this car should be faster, but it's not. And correlation is super important. Yeah. And that's important for us, and I would imagine it's important in the business world too. Correlating the models that you're using to reality is really, really important.
Absolutely. I think it's a challenge for all businesses, organizations. They've got all this volume of data at their disposal. How do they distill that into insights and then onto action? Do you have any?
That and useful insights and action that's actually better than taking no action, for example, or doing something else. And again, that's through correlation. That's through looking back and saying, okay, this is the data that I had. This is what I thought it was telling me. This is what we've done because of it. Was that right? And you just have to have that feedback loop. And we do that all the time. In Formula One, it's pretty easy because it's lap time that you're looking for. And we don't have the lap time that you thought you were going to get from the models and from your CFD simulation, from your computer software that says this should be this much faster and it isn't. Then you go back and try to figure out why. So for us, it's easy. The measurements are easy, but you have to measure. And then if you measure, you can then go back and verify that you have good correlation. Super important. If you don't have good correlation, again, you're going to use data to drive decisions. You have bad data, you're never going to make a good decision.
Yeah. So now you've optimized the car for race day. I imagine there are a number of scenarios that you need to kind of map out for how the race is how you think the race is going to play out. Can you maybe just unpack that for us? And how many scenarios do you take into these races, and how quickly do you move from plan A to plan B, etc.?
Well, there's a lot of stuff, again, that to be able to make good decisions on race day. And the decisions aren't massive, right? It's when are we going to stop? What tire are we going to use? How often are we going to stop? So, is it a one stop? Is it a two stop? Do we start on the soft? Do we end on the soft? Do you start on the hard? Do you start on the medium? So the permutations aren't big, but if you get them wrong, you're going to go backwards. Your competitor is going to beat you. So you do a couple of things. You run a lot of scenarios with what you know is best for your car, and you assume what the others might be doing based on the data that you have. But to get to that Sunday, before you get there, you need a lot of input, and more input than you can garner, say, at a test, right? So when you go testing in the winter, you learn about your car, but what you don't learn is what's the tarmac roughness in Melbourne, because we tested in Bahrain. You need to know that. What's the tire degradation like here versus Bahrain? You're racing here, you're not racing in Bahrain, you tested in Bahrain. You need to know those things. What's the degradation profile on the tire look like? So you've got to run it at high fuel, just like you're racing, for a long period of time, and then you empirically can see what the profile's like. You need all that input to make a good decision. If the tires last forever and there's no deg, then one stop it. If they don't last forever because of the tarmac or because of the weather, or say it rains, then you do something totally different. Again, good information to drive a good decision. And you need that information before you can make that decision. And that's what we'll be doing. The teams will be doing on Friday. Here, it might rain on Sunday, or an 80% chance. So if that's the case, Friday, Saturday, you do a bunch of testing to set you up for your strategy on Sunday, and that could be all out the window. But the beauty of that is it's the same for everybody. So then those who will make good decisions are those who can guess a little bit better than the others, and it's an educated guess.
I've got a question from the crowd.
Mark, thanks. I can listen to your stories all day long. So you talked a lot about the data you collect from the car and the track and weather, but what about the people themselves, like the driver, the pit crew? Do you collect data on people and help with like the operational?
So the car is completely instrumented. So, you can see where a driver is, for example, on the brakes. You can see the force that's input into the brake pedal. You can see what his right foot's doing on the throttle. You can see what the steering wheel's doing and what angle the steering wheel's at. You see velocity of the car. You see acceleration. You see deceleration. All that is shown in a race trace. And the drivers, and we overlay from one driver to the other. If one driver's 0.2 quicker, well, where's that 0.2 coming from? And you can overlay it and you can pick it out. Well, 0.1 here, I'm braking a little bit later than you are. That helps me. Or that later braking means I'm turning in too late or too early and I'm losing time. I'm scrubbing time. So all that's instrumented. And on top of all that, you get driver feedback, right? You sit there after a session and the driver will go through every corner, almost every lap, and tell you what he was feeling and how he thinks or what he thinks we should be doing to make the car go faster through all those corners. Some drivers will just pick problematic corners, the ones that they're happy with, they say nothing. And other drivers will, Sebastian Vettel, the best I work with, he would break every corner down into 3 phases. The entry phase, mid phase, and exit. So braking phase, mid corner, and then exit. Every corner of every lap, he will tell you what he was feeling.
And that's his way to break that down?
Exactly. He had the mental capacity to remember every one of them. It's just amazing to me. I'll tell you just something that to get your head around. Barcelona is around 4 kilometers, a little bit over, 14 corners in Barcelona. So you have, for example, in those 14 corners, you have a braking phase, and you have an entry phase. You hit the apex and you come out. And as you're coming out and the car straightens out, you're on the accelerator. Because what you don't want to do is lose grip. right? Once you break the rear tires, you're losing time. So you want to be just on the cusp of adhesion, right? You want to, and throughout the phase, braking, entry, lateral acceleration, and then straight line acceleration out. If in those 14 corners, and sometimes you're braking for a couple 100 yards, you turn in, you hit the apex and you're coming out on the accelerator. If you lose 1/10 of a second in each one of those corners, and 1/10 of a second is a half of an eye blink, right? It takes you about 2/10 of a second to go up and down with your eyes. So half of an eye blink. You're 1.4 seconds behind by the end of the lap. It's a lifetime. That's a lifetime. If in that phase, you're 1/2 of a second behind, so a quarter of an eye blink, you're 7/10 of a second behind by the end of the lap. A lifetime in Formula One. We're looking for, in a new aero package, 2/10 of a second a lap, and then that's successful. And those are the margins that we're looking for. Those are the advantages that you want over your competitor. So McLaren in testing, for example, at Bahrain, looked like on the long runs they were about a half second faster than their competitors, which is a huge advantage. But if you think of a half a second in Barcelona, that's still less than a half an eye blink in every corner times 14. It's minuscule. And you have different drivers, different capabilities, different aero packages, different engines. You treat the tires differently. All that's different. And at the end of it, you're looking for a quarter of a second per lap, or 2/10 of a second per lap. And that is the competitiveness of Formula One. And when you watch it on Sunday, and you see, or on Saturday, Sunday it'll be raining. Who knows what's going to happen? But on Saturday, when you watch qualifying, look up and down the timesheets to see how close everybody is.
Thank you for joining us for Driving Systems of High Performance, a podcast about teamwork. Thank you as well to our special guest, Otmar Szafnauer, for sharing his insights today. You can check out more about Otmar, as well as the work Accenture is doing on large-scale transformations, using the links in our show notes. We'll be back with more conversations soon. Follow us now in your podcast app, and you won't miss an episode.